Oh, okay.
We should be there now.
Okay.
There you go. Sorry for
Well,
the
and
delay.
lo and behold, I lost all my documents. Second here.
Roll call.
You took over my screen.
It's all over mine too. There you go.
Are you back?
There we go. Yeah, that helps. Okay. I would like to call this meeting to order and welcome everybody to the November 11, 2020 City of Henderson Board of Zoning Adjustment hearing. My first order of business is I would like to thank the veterans, as this is Veterans Day. I would like to thank those members who might be veterans on our board. I would also like to acknowledge any veterans across the country and thank them for their duty. I would like to include first responders in that. And now, Sarah, may I get a roll call, please?
Mike Arnold.
Here.
Heather Knight.
Here.
Rob Turney.
Here.
Landon Overfield.
Here.
Marcos Nicholas.
Here.
Thank you, Sarah. We normally block the open microphone on the online meetings to allow the current speaker to be heard without interruption. If anybody wishes to be heard when I ask for comments by others, please use the raise your hand icon or use the instant message feature in your Zoom menu. Mr. Nix, our first appeal, will you describe that to us?
Yes, appeal number 3410 is submitted by Lewis Shane Smithart for the property located at 1619 South Green Street. The applicant is requesting a conditional use permit to operate a towing business pursuant to Article 21, Section 21.03A, Appendix A, zoning of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Henderson, Kentucky. The property is zoned highway commercial. All adjoining property owners have been notified, and we have received a couple of phone calls and one letter. I would like to make note that Section 21.03, the conditional uses states that any uses not allowed above which are of the same general character as the above permitted uses, which will not be detrimental to the district in which they are located, and which will not be objectionable by reason of odors, dust, smoke, cinders, gas fumes, noise, vibrations, and refuse matter, are eligible for a conditional use permit. The procedure in Section 4.03 shall be followed, and that is a procedure for hearing, approving, monitoring, and the reviews of the conditional uses. The applicant, in filling out their conditional use permit worksheet, states that the requested conditional use is justified because it is an essential use, in that towing businesses are by definition an essential use. They went on to state that the conditional use would promote the public health, safety, and welfare by providing for a towing business in an area that has had an auto repair shop and has similar uses near it along Green Street. Conditions that would eliminate or minimize adverse effects of the proposed use in the zoning district are fencing and directing lighting away from residential areas west of the property. Now, the picture that you see now is the lot in question, circled in red. I'd like to share recent history on this property. The city's code enforcement office has had major problems with this site since May and June of 2019, when Chris Smithart, perhaps a brother of the applicant, came to get approval for a mechanic shop with a tow truck. We incorrectly assumed that the tow truck would bring vehicles that just broke down in and have them repaired at the mechanic shop. That information was grossly overrepresented when a large number of vehicles in all kinds of conditions began arriving and overwhelmed the property. We discovered that these were vehicles that had been stored abandoned on property further down on South Green Street that was in the county, and this is the picture of the location where they came from. The county had that property under nuisance violations for junk vehicles, and the people there were being evicted by the property owners. Due to those issues, they vacated that property and began moving a large amount of those vehicles, trucks, and old equipment to this 1619 South Green Street property. Guideline requirements for placing vehicles on hard surface were not met, along with the issue of nuisance of junk vehicle accumulation. September 2019, a letter of non-conforming use was sent, which indicated from our observations that the site had extended its original boundaries and use by having an influx of abandoned and unused stored vehicles, trucks, and equipment. Dump trucks, tree grinders, panel vans, and flatbed trucks were observed in the rear of the park area on grass. We were advised after an earlier phone call with Chris Smithhart that things would be taken care of. After a couple of weeks and re-inspections, no effort had been made, and if anything, additional junk vehicles were hauled onto the site. October 4th of 2019, due to no change in the property, our office sent out an official notice of violation regarding Code Article 4, Section 4.08, junkyards. Junkyards are not designated as permitted uses in any district. The definition of junkyards is used auto part yards, salvage yards are defined as a use of an area of any lot for the storage, keeping, or abandonment of junk, including scrap metals or other scrap materials, or for the dismantling, demolition, abandonment of automobiles or other vehicles or machines or parts thereof.
Right. Sorry to interrupt, but the board is not seeing the photos or the video from the PowerPoint.
I'm looking at the video and the PowerPoint off the presentation that had been sent to all of us. We may not be seeing what you're driving, but it is available to the.
It has to be shared. It has to be viewed for the public.
Okay, let me retry it.
Okay. Yes, thank you, counsel. Got it.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so do you just want me to go through them quickly then?
Yeah.
Okay. Another definition, motor vehicle or machinery junkyard shall mean and include any place where 5 or more junk, wrecked, or inoperative, non-operative vehicles, machines, or other similar scrap or salvage materials are deposited, parked, placed, or otherwise located. At the time, corrective action was to cease operation and remove all salvage and stored vehicles and equipment, to remove all unlicensed and/or inoperable vehicles from the property. A reinspection was performed 2 weeks later with no change to the site. A request to meet was made by Chris Smithhart's attorney for October 25th, 2019. The code enforcement and administration staff met with Smithhart and his attorney to discuss the zoning violation. On October 29th, an administrative review appeal was made stating that the business operation was not a junkyard. But then on November 5th, a letter was sent to Smithhart acknowledging receipt of his withdrawal of the appeal due to the relocation of the business from the property. The outcome was that most of the abandoned vehicles were removed. Some are still there. It appeared that very little, if any, business related to the mechanic shop was ever performed, and the property was merely being used as a dumping ground for junk vehicles. This spring, April 2020, some large tractor tires showed up on the site. And I think we've got pictures of there now on screen. They were brought in through an adjoining old gas station property, which was not part of this property, and deposited in this opening along the north property line. A week or so later, some additional tires were brought in and dumped. These were written up as a notice of violation on April 3rd and citation on April 25th, with reinspection of the citation on May 7th, and it was still not in compliance. These were sent to our Code Enforcement Board for action, but due to COVID and the governor's state of emergency edict, all of our citations since April have been tolled and are waiting for state authorization for the Code Enforcement Board to meet for final action on citations. For whatever reason, perhaps in preparation for this meeting, it seems that the large tires have more recently just been removed. This basically is the comments and the history on this property that we, the Code Enforcement Board, have experienced. Or excuse me, not the Code Enforcement Board, but the Code Enforcement Office. And just wanted to make sure that those comments were presented so that you had that information regarding the issues that we've had with this property.
Rob, can I interject? Here, I think that due to Ray's comments, that you probably ought to swear him in and ask if that was true for the record.
Okay. Okay. Ray, Mr. Nix, do you promise to tell the truth in all of your testimony?
I do, and everything that I've said is true. Thank you.
Thank you.
That is the report that I have currently, and I turn the rest of this over to the Board of Zoning Adjustment for your review, comments, and discernment.
Okay. Mr. Nix, this site, can you describe what this site was previously and kind of the history of the site before it ended up in the current owner's hands?
I think for years it had been an old gas station, and then probably more recently, but still quite a few years back, was used as a tire shop. And I think this is in an estate that is that the current people are either leasing or proposing to lease.
The property owner is on,
Okay.
Please repeat.
the property owner of the property is in attendance on this meeting.
Okay. Ray, have we had complaints about the property prior to its current use?
Not since May of 2019, to my knowledge.
Okay. Well, prior to that, it looked like the property had been cleaned up pretty well, and I've noticed that it has been degrading over the course of time. Mr.
I will
Nix,
say that the aerial view picture that I had was from 2018, and you will see that it was pretty much a clean site with nothing on it other than the building.
okay. Mr. Nix, you said you had some calls on this property. Would you discuss those calls as part of your testimony?
The calls related to being accessible to come to the meeting and make comments regarding this property. The people that had called do not have internet access, so they are here personally to make comments.
Okay. Does this board have any questions for Mr. Nix?
I have a
do.
question.
Go ahead, Heather.
Mr. Nix, in a typical towing business, can you refresh my memory on how many vehicles are allowed to be on a property like that?
I have difficulty with towing businesses because they are so similar in definition to junkyards that it's really a difficult thing for me to answer directly.
Okay. Well, I didn't know if we had.
I do know that some of these businesses are governed by state regulations and licenses, and so that's all I'm aware of.
Okay. Well, I knew we had
Heather,
other tow businesses, so I didn't know if there was a specific number.
Heather, this is Dawn.
Yes, ma'am.
If you look under motor vehicle, it says that we can't have more than 5 or more junk, wrecked, or non-operable vehicles.
Okay.
That would make it a junkyard. But, you know, that's if they're wrecked and salvageable. I
Right.
don't know, if you all grant this, you all could put as one of the conditions, the number of vehicles that would be allowed to be on this property at one time, because that would be a condition that you could include, to this business.
Well, and just one thing that I know, I have a son-in-law that works at a towing business in Evansville, but he enlightened me that Kentucky state law says that when you tow a vehicle, and nobody comes to get it, they cannot sell it until 60 days has passed. So for what it's worth, just so everybody knows that little piece of information.
Okay. Landon,
Yeah, Mr. Nix, did the removal of the tractor tires bring this property in compliance?
I would say no, because there are still vehicles, equipment that are parked in the rear of the property on grass areas. I really can't see through the fence, and maybe now that the leaves are falling, I'll be able to see a little bit better. But I still say there's a large number of equipment and vehicles there. I can't say how many, however.
Landon, you could ask the property owner that question.
Oh,
I have
well,
a question for Dawn.
okay. I would rather ask Mr. Nix if it was in compliance with what he had issued as a non-compliance. But my question also is to you, Dawn. Should we even be considering an appeal for a conditional use permit if the property is not in compliance with our codes office?
Well, you know, they have the right to come forward and request conditional use, but that could be something that you all consider as to whether it promotes the safety, the public welfare or safety, if it's a property that's not in compliance. And again, one of the conditions that you could make is that it come into compliance.
Okay, Dawn, I have a question. Okay, so these are, I mean, even if they're related, they're two different people. So can we base what the other relative did and make conditions on this relative to fix the other relative stuff? Like, that's kind of confusing. I didn't know, because they're two different people.
Okay, so the property owner, I believe, is on here, and it is the responsibility of the property owner to ensure that his property is in compliance. So
Right.
So yes, I mean, you can require the property owner, and the property owner is responsible to make sure that his property is in compliance with the city code, zoning and code requirements. Ordinances. I couldn't think of the word ordinance, sorry.
Mr. Nix, the property was presented to you. I'm going to do just a I'm going to paraphrase what I understand. The property was presented to you as a towing business. And under a towing business, we would see cars in and out. We wouldn't see cars staying long-term. After allowing it as a towing business, it became more of a junkyard or storage area. And I'm going to just pull a number out of cars in excess of 5 cars. So we just have a lot of cars being stored at a towing yard. Is that kind of the 50,000 foot level?
Yeah, I think if you have a towing business, and that is the intent of it, and you are in need of a place to store those towed vehicles as opposed to bringing them in and fixing them up and sending them right out the door, then you're turning them. But if it's just strictly a towing business, you're just picking up vehicles and trying to find a place to put them. And like you said, 60 days minimum. I mean, how many vehicles could somebody pick up in 60 days, then try to rotate them back out? I mean, we're talking a bunch of vehicles that would be stuck there.
Okay. Does the board have any? Yes.
Rob, were you asking what the previous use was? Because I believe the other Smith Hart use was, his express use for this property was a mechanics shop. It wasn't a towing company.
I was trying to get an understanding of what the towing business, what our expectations would be of the towing business.
Okay.
But yes, thank you for reminding me, because that had slipped my mind that the original intent was to use it as a mechanic shop. Does this board have any other questions for Mr. Nix? If there are no other questions for Mr. Nix, I would invite the applicant to present to us, please.
Yes, this is Chris Hopgood.
Mr. Hopgood, do you promise to tell the truth?
I do.
Mr. Hopgood, is anybody with you that's going to be providing testimony?
Shane Smith Hart is behind me. You can see him there in the mask and the work coat.
Okay. Mr. Smith Hart, do you promise to tell the truth if we ask testimony from you?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Hopgood, what would you like to present?
Mr. Sheriff is here, and it's his mother that owns the property. He's representing her today, and the proposal is to lease it to Mr. Smith Hart. Mr. Smith Hart, it's a startup towing business. So you get on a rotation, and if there's a wreck on the parkway and you're up, then you go and pick up the car or the truck. And if the person that's there says, take it to the Chevy dealer, that's where you take it. Take it to Hargis Body Shop, that's where you take it. If there's nowhere to take it, then that's where you have to bring it in. Mr. Smith Hart doesn't have any intent of maintaining cars any longer than he has to. The insurance companies, will only pay storage so long. And as soon as he can rotate them out, he will. It's hard to say a number because it's a startup business. So obviously he'll be in the rotation, and I don't know how many, there's a handful in the rotation. It's going to depend on how many wrecks or breakdowns there are, and then how many people then have no place to take it. For example, if your car breaks down on the parkway and you get it towed, you may say, take it to Kenny Kent or take it to the Chevrolet dealer for repairs. If it's wrecked and you know who your body man is, you may say take it to Chris Gish or take it to Hargis. But so it's hard to say, A, how many he's going to get, and B, how many will be brought here. But he does have an intent to rotate them out as quickly as he can. So the insurance companies will obviously have an incentive to pay as little storage as possible. And then if once he has the green light, if it's 60 days and he can get rid of it, then he wants to get rid of it and salvage it.
Mr. Hopgood, do you know how many cars are currently on the property?
I don't.
Mr. Smithart, do you know how many cars are currently on the property?
I'm gonna estimate probably 10 behind the fence, and there are 2 chippers, wood chippers, which all of those vehicles are not part of Smithart Brothers Trucking. Once we are approved to be able to operate there, all of those pieces that are back there, cars, trucks, whatever may be back there, will be removed from that property. Those are not part of Smithart Brothers Trucking.
Okay. Does this board have any questions for Mr. Smithart or Mr. Hopgood?
I have a
Or Mr.
question for
Sheriff.
Mr. Smithart. Mr. Smithart, can you let us know if Chris Smithart, who is currently using the property, is a member of Smithart Brothers Towing?
He is not. He is my brother, but he is not. I own Smithart Brothers myself. I'm a sole proprietor of the LLC.
Does Chris Smithart have any vehicles on your property or the property that you're proposing to lease?
Yes, he does.
And are those in addition to the 10 plus 2 that you have?
No, no, sir. Those 10 plus 2 are his. Smithart Brothers Trucking is not operated from that facility. I'm not doing business from that facility. I'm wanting to start the business from that facility.
So what business is Chris doing from that facility?
Chris, what's left down there is stuff left over from where Chris moved from 2100 to where he's at now at 636 Highway 41A. They are cars that he has not been moved up to his new facility.
Okay. So you, as Smithart Brothers Trucking, are going to, do you currently rent the property?
My brother has the lease signed with the owner of the company, but if I can get a conditional permit to operate that, I would take over that lease and pay.
He'll become the tenant and his brother will be out.
Right.
Okay. So as Smithart Brothers Trucking, your business takes over that lease, Chris Smithart's vehicles will immediately be removed?
Yes. Well, I mean, identify immediately. Immediately would be as quick as I can get them out of there. Yes.
Okay. Does this board have any additional questions for Mr. Smithart or Mr. Hopkins?
I have one.
Mr. Smithart, oh, I'm sorry. This is
Mr.
Dawn
Overfield, go
Kelsey.
ahead.
Mr. Smithart, do you have any idea as to how many cars can be parked on the current solid surfaces of that property?
Okay.
You talking about the concrete?
Yeah,
I think there's some gravel in the back, but you're talking about the concrete in the front.
I'm talking about the concrete under HWU's rules.
That would be in front of the fence.
Right.
I mean, I don't know how many could be parked there. I mean, I don't plan on having any vehicles parked there. All vehicles that are towed will have to be put behind the fence. So I don't plan on having any vehicles out in front of that fence or in front of the building other than possibly my tow truck.
So, go ahead.
Mr. Overfield, did you have a question?
I do. Mr. Smithart or Chris, there's how long would the vehicles you tow stay there if you have to bring them to your towing business?
I mean, based on what I understand, and based on the work that I've done to investigate that, talking to different people like Tri-State Towing, and some of the other tow yards, Jamie Hastings and people like that, it really depends on the vehicle itself. Insurance companies try to settle on vehicles very quick and get them off your property because they don't want to keep the storage. But on a rough basis, what Gary told me is you could keep a vehicle for 2 or 3 weeks before the insurance company would send somebody down there to pull them away. But he has had people, as far as when he picks up cars, not have insurance, and those people will leave their cars there as long as they can, and then it would be up to me then to sell that car as scrap, but that takes 60 days.
Okay, and that's sort of where I'm having the problem, because it seems like those cars would turn into part of a salvage yard. You know, if we limited the number of cars that you were able to put behind the fence and leave there on at least a 60 or 90-day basis, if we limited that to 5, is that going to, will that allow you to operate and make a profit?
No.
No, sir. No, sir.
Mr.
Because,
Mr.
I mean,
Mr. Smithhart, what would that number be?
it's really, I mean, once again, based on the existing tow yards in Henderson, one of them being directly down the street, less than 2 blocks from the facility, 1619 South Green. If you look there, there could be anywhere upwards of 40 to 50 cars there at any time.
Is that right out?
Now, yeah, right, or Tri-State, yes. And if you go across town on Lower 2nd Street at Jamie's lot, there's probably at his lot today, probably 70 or 80. If you go out past on Sand Lane, go on out past the park, there's another tow yard out there that, I mean, I'm just guessing he's probably got 50 or 60 cars there.
Much better.
Is that Hazelwood's?
No, that's
Mr. Smithhart,
yes.
this is Heather. I'm on the board.
I
When the
have-
cars are behind the fence, are they visible from the street?
No, ma'am.
Thank you.
Are they visible to the neighbors?
Currently, there is one section of the fence that is not up yet, that I plan on putting up, that will make it to where, no, it will not be visible to the neighbors.
Mr. Smithhart, is your business plan include storing anything other than cars and trucks, such as car parts, trailers, tires, things like that?
I can't limit it to like, I'm not gonna say that I'm not gonna have a wreck where I'm gonna have to pick up a trailer and bring it back, but everything will be limited to whatever is to be towed on my tow truck. I don't see any reason why we should have spare tires thrown everywhere or anything like that, because that's not part of the towing. I'm not gonna run a tire shop out of there or anything like that. It's strictly gonna be a towing facility.
Will there be mechanical maintenance done on any of the vehicles, or and aside from your tow truck? Because you've got to maintain your equipment.
Absolutely.
Will there be
there will be no other mechanical work done there other than on our vehicles, my vehicles themselves, Smithhart Brothers trucking vehicles. That's the only thing that'll have any mechanical work done to it.
So this, I mean, you're not going to push out, or your business plan is not to be beyond just a towing organization that tows them in, puts them behind the fence, works with the insurance company and tries to get them out of there 60 days, whatever the insurance companies work with you on.
Yes, sir. And hopefully sooner, because I'm a one-man show. It's not like I don't want to keep any vehicle there any longer than it has to.
Mr. Smithhart, I'm going to ask you a question that we've asked previously, but does your business plan define how many vehicles that you might have there, the maximum vehicles you might have at any one time?
Sir, I'd be scared to tell you. I don't know. I mean, this is new to me. I hope to keep it to a minimum because once again, a vehicle behind that fence means that I'm not being paid. But depending on how many times the city and the state uses me to pull vehicles in, it's very hard for me to say.
Okay. I again extend questions to the board.
Yeah, and I hate to be such a nitpicker, but I guess that's the lawyer in me, isn't it, Chris? If I guess it's Tri-State now, what used to be Ride Out Wrecker Service
Yes.
is 2 blocks down the street, doesn't that sort of lessen your theory that this will provide a towing service to the area? Isn't there already a towing service to the area?
Yeah, there are, what, 4 or 5 in town?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're just competition to other people.
Well, I mean, this particular area, and, there's one 2 blocks away. And part of the appeal, I think, was that this would provide something that's needed in the area.
Well, not necessarily the area, but it's a essential use because you got to have a towing business, and obviously the more you have, then the more spread out it is. We're not talking about putting this in the Gateway Zone. This is on South Green, which is a pretty industrial area. So
I believe that Ride Out Tri-State is a non-conforming use holdover. I don't have that file in front of me, but I think that it is operating as a non-conforming use because it's grandfathered in.
That's
it's been there a
correct.
long time. Yeah, it's been there a long
Is
time.
that correct?
Well, there's 2 tow yards.
Hey, hang on. Mr. Nix, is that correct?
Yes, they are non-conforming use and have been for a number of years, and they're grandfathered in by virtue of that.
Thank you, Mr. Nix. Miss Knight, what was your question, please?
Well, I don't know if it's a question, but I'm guessing, Mr. Smithhart, Mr. Hobgood, when you say area, you're just talking about Henderson in general, not South Green as in a specific area. I mean, am I correct?
Right. It's an
Okay.
essential use in the sense that you got to have one. Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, I know we've got 2 tow yards underneath 2nd Street overpass, so that's why I think when they said area, Landon, I think they meant all of Henderson.
Pretty broad area.
Yeah.
Does this board have any other questions for Mr. Hopgood or for Mr. Smithhart?
Yes, I've got one question I maybe would like to address to him. I know, like with Tri-State or whatever, he had several trucks and what size? What size truck or trucks do you use?
The truck that I use is called a medium duty. It's not it won't haul semis. It won't do anything over 1.5 ton vehicle. So mostly cars, medium-sized trucks, no large box vans, buses, diesels, or anything of that matter.
Okay. And are there, you have to keep records of the vehicle for when it comes in, you have to log it and you have track of it from that time till it leaves.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Does this board have any additional questions for Mr. Smithhart or Mr. Hopgood?
Mr. Sheriff is here if you have questions for him too.
Okay. Mr. Sheriff is the business or the property owner?
It's the son of the lady that owns the property.
Okay. Mr. Smithhart, I'm going to summarize what I think I've heard. Your brothers, if you get a conditional use permit, you are going to take over the lease of the property. Your brother is going to remove his vehicles. We have not heard a timeline for your brother to remove the vehicles. However, the expectation is that your brother would remove the vehicles. Once you start the business, you are going to be towing passenger cars, pickup trucks, and trucks up to 1.5 tons. You are not going to be doing mechanical maintenance to customers' vehicles. Your only mechanical maintenance will be to your vehicles. The cars that you tow will be stored behind a fence. The expectation is that those vehicles will be at most there for, my perception is 60 to 90 days, with most of the vehicles turned much quicker than that. You had indicated that you felt like the neighbors can't see into your property except for a few spots in the fence. Have I portrayed accurately what you have presented to us?
Yes, sir.
And the one, that I'm going to say there's a couple of things missing from what you've discussed. We don't know how many cars. We don't know how quickly Chris's vehicles will get removed from the property. And we don't know the maximum amount of time a car will be, or a vehicle will be left on your property. Those are 3 unknowns at this point.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Rob,
Yes, sir.
I got a question. Can a condition to it would be that he cannot start operation until the other vehicles that are existing there are moved?
I think that we can do any conditional use statement that we want to do. How soon the cars have to be removed, how many cars he can keep, the length of time he can keep the cars, and how he would handle his fencing, and even as down to keeping the weeds off the fence. I mean, we can put anything in there as far as a conditional use permit if we are allowing him to use this property for a towing business. Our zoning identifies this as only available for use as under a conditional use permit. They have to come to us. We have to give them a conditional use in order to do this. Is that right, Ray? Or Dawn?
Yes.
So, Mac, to answer your
Yes.
question, yes, we can put any condition on it that we feel is appropriate.
Okay.
Rob, this is Teresa. The property owner, Mr. Sheriff, has indicated that he would like to speak by raising his hand on the Zoom meeting.
Okay. I will bring him in just a second here. But I want to make sure that our board is complete with their questions for Mr. Hopgood and Mr. Smithhart, because they are the applicants. Is everybody okay? Okay, with that said, and this will invite Mr. Sheriff into the conversation. Is there anybody here to speak for or against appeal? I'm sorry, what is this appeal number?
3410.
3410.
Okay, is there anybody here to speak for or against appeal 3410? Teresa, if you'll bring him in.
He should be available to speak now.
Okay. Mr. Sheriff, please, am I correct in your name is Mr. Sheriff?
Yes.
Okay. Please state your name and your address, please.
Brandon Sheriff, 3028 23rd Avenue South, Nashville, Tennessee, 37215.
Mr. Sheriff, do you promise to tell the truth?
I do.
Mr. Sheriff, what would you like to add to this testimony?
So this isn't really a for or against statement, just informational purposes. I'm gathering information just like you guys are from this meeting. I did want to note that this would be an application process for a potential changing of tenant. So it wouldn't necessarily, you had mentioned that they would be taking over the lease or the brother would be taking over the lease. This would be an application process to potentially take over the lease because, again, the lease is not in this person's name or this towing service's name. So I just wanted to, just from an informational standpoint, add that.
Okay. Mr. Nix, is the current lease holder not in compliance?
Well, it's hard for me to say. I don't know how many vehicles are back there, but yeah, I can say it's not in compliance because the items that we have seen are not on hard surface in the rear of the property, for one, and that's a main one currently.
Okay. So, and then I come back to Mr. Sheriff. Mr. Sheriff, you are aware that your current leaseholder is not in compliance with our zoning regulations?
I was not.
Okay, please understand that we have discussed his issues and we're trying to resolve his issues.
And I have a property manager that is local, and I will absolutely contact him immediately, essentially.
Thank you, Mr. Sheriff. Does this board have any questions for Mr. Sheriff? Does this board have any questions for Mr. Sheriff? Thank you, Mr. Sheriff. Mr. Hopgood or Mr. Smithhart, do you have any comments relating to Mr. Sheriff's testimony?
No, we don't. We don't.
Okay. Is there anybody else that would like to speak for or against Appeal 3410?
Yes, Rob, we have one in the audience here.
Okay. Would the person who would like to speak for or against Appeal 3410 please approach the podium, state your name and address?
Bill Russell, live at 326 Jamin Avenue.
Mr. Nix, do we have a sign-in sheet for him?
Yeah.
Yes, we do, and he's filling it out at this time.
Oh, okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I'm going to ask you to state your name again.
Bill Russell.
Okay. Mr. Russell, do you promise to tell the truth, please?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Russell, what would you like to add?
Well, I mean, I was just saying, like Brady was saying earlier about all the cars that sit back there, and then once they said, you know, they had to leave, they just kept staying and staying, and there's still several back there now. I'd say probably 10 or 12 different automobiles back that way. And with the towing thing, I don't know, it seemed like it would just stay there. I mean, 90 days is a long time to start adding up cars.
Mr. Russell, do you live in the vicinity of this location?
Yeah, I live kind of like catty corner from it.
When you say catty corner, behind it, in front of it, next door?
It would be more like on the side of it.
So do you have I mean, from your home, do you have a pretty good view of the lot where cars would be stored?
Yeah, from my back window, the tires, the picture that he showed earlier, from my back window at the kitchen window is a direct view of that.
Is there a fence between you and the property?
There's a fence, but there's an opening right there where the tires were sitting at.
Okay. So the fence, the fence is here and there. And is the fence currently have something in it to obstruct view where the fence actually is?
Trees and weeds, stuff like that.
Okay, so it's not a visual barrier. It's just a physical barrier. Is that
Right.
correct?
Yes.
Does this board have any questions for Mr. Russell?
I do. If the fence was fixed, would he be able to see the vehicles at that point?
If the fence was all the way around it, no, I wouldn't be able to see them, but I mean, there's still gonna be a bunch of junk cars there.
Does this board have any additional questions for Mr. Russell? If there are no additional questions for Mr. Russell, Mr. Russell, if you'd like to be seated, please be seated. We may need to call you back, but please be seated. Mr. Hopgood and Mr. Smithhart, do you have any response to Mr. Russell's testimony?
Well, the only thing that I want to be said is that there is an opening in a fence where the trees have grown up. There is actually a fence there. The trees and everything has grew up around that, causing a barrier, but there is a fence there. There is just a section about, I'm going to say roughly 30 foot, where it looked like there used to be a gate that was being used for that property at one time that is gone. Part of what we were planning on doing, if everything works out, was to put a fence up covering that opening to where the view that he was speaking of would not be there any longer. That he would not be able to look out his back door or his back window and look in and be able to see the cars that are actually being located behind that fence.
So is your proposal, or is your plan to put a fence up that is a visual barrier, not just a physical barrier?
What my plans are, based on given the approval, is to work with you guys to put up what I need, but keeping in mind that being a startup, it'd be very hard for me to just jump in there and put a fence up around that, a complete fence up around that whole complete property.
Okay. Anything else, gentlemen?
There's a lot of natural barrier there, and what he's talking about is filling in the natural barrier with the fence that would block the view. Mr. Russell doesn't touch this property. If you look at the PVA map, there's a dog leg from the Swifty between Mr. Russell and the side of this property. But I understand he's got a straight shot into the back of this, but he doesn't actually touch this.
Thank you.
From the abandoned Swift.
Any additional questions? Is there anybody here to speak for or against Appeal 3410? Is there anybody here to speak for or against Appeal
Yes.
3410?
Rob, Mrs. Russell would like to speak.
Okay. Mrs. Russell, if you'll approach the podium and sign in with your name and address. Will you also please state your name and address?
Angela Russell, 326 Yeaman Avenue, Henderson.
Ms. Russell, do you promise to tell the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you so much. What would you like to add?
Prior to tonight, after I got off of work, I just wanted to take a couple pictures at the back there, and there's been a toilet back there for over a year and a half. There is 23 cars in the back, and from the beginning, he's had oil sitting back there, and just like salvage yards, a lot of stuff leaks out in the ground and stuff, and there are kids in the back of that alley there, and I know I've read certain things about salvage yards, that kids are exceptionally prone to health defects if all this stuff gets, you know, in the air. And when he first came there, he pushed all this stuff out, and there was all kinds of, like centipede bugs, crickets, we got termites, and just like bugs everywhere, where he just rubbed all the wood back there and everything. But I just want to say, there was a guy, about 20 years ago, Frazier, that had a garage, and they would only let him have 7 cars, and he worked on them, and they was out. I have on my phone, when he first started, there were still cars back there. To the day he came there, and that's still there, along with the toilet.
Thank you, Mrs. Russell. Does this board have any questions for Mrs. Russell? Mr. Hopgood and Mr. Smithhart, your brothers left this property in a heck of a shape. And I understand that you're a going forward basis and your brother is there now, but good Lord, it sounds like it needs to be cleaned up. I mean, the testimony I heard from the Russells is based on history, based on what's there currently. And yes, that is what Mr. Nix is trying to address with Chris Smithhart. So I'm just going to kind of leave it at that for now. And I'm going to ask if there's anybody here to speak for or against Appeal 3410.
May I just add one more thing?
Yes, Mrs. Russell. I'll remind you, you're still under oath.
Yes, sir. Directly across the street from where he wants to do this, he's done hauled off. There's boats and trucks, and I also have pictures of lots of rusty, I don't know what it is, just looks like just a bunch of garbage across the street. So that comes from over there too. And he has hauled off his stuff out in the county too. So, and then he's got, next door to us. So it's actually in 3 different spots right at the moment. So that's all I was going to say. So.
Thank you, Mrs. Russell. Mr. Hopgood, I know you guys are having a conversation, so I'm just going to kind of wait until to see if you guys want to speak.
We think it's best to table this, get it cleaned up, and then come back next month.
Okay.
That would avoid any condition from that standpoint on the property.
I can make a motion.
Let's ask Mr. Smithhart if he's sure he can have that done in 30 days. I mean, that's good. I don't know who's ultimately going to be responsible for what is there now, whether it's Mr. Smithhart's brother or whether it's the property owners or whatever. But, for my vote, it's got to be cleaned up before we give a conditional use to operate a towing service out of it.
Yeah.
Can you do it in 30 days?
If it can't be cleaned up in 30 days, we can table it again. I mean, there's an incentive out there to get this done. So.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a very good approach. Mr. Smithhart, I think that is a good move on your part. It will show a commitment to getting this property in compliance. I know you're going to have to work with your brother, and that's, I know you don't have the property yet, but I think that's going to go a long way. So, Heather, you had initially started with a motion, please.
Can I say one thing?
Yes, sir.
The other thing that I have to do within that 30 days is I have to get with the landowner also. I want to make sure he's on board with the application portion of it, to do the application, make sure he's good with all that. And then that's part of getting it cleaned up also, is getting with him and clarifying with him that my application would be accepted by him and that he would be okay with everything it is that I was going to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you were to get this, it doesn't mean you have to do it.
Right.
This is just a condition to
Exactly.
be able to go forward. But if you're deal falls through between now and then, we can come back in a month and say, hey, we got to go a different direction.
Right.
Okay, I think this is a good plan.
I second Heather's motion.
This is Heather Knight. I'll make a motion that we table
Appeal 3410.
3410 to the December meeting.
Second.
May I get a second?
Can I say one thing before you vote?
Yes,
Can I
please.
ask one question to the clerk? Clerk, what is the date that we would have to advertise this?
I believe next week, the 18th.
The 18th. So do you all want us to go ahead and advertise it on the November 18th for the December meeting?
Dawn?
Yes.
Rob, I need to say something to Dawn, this is Teresa. Typically, when it's been tabled and everybody's been notified, we have not
Do it
been
again.
advertised.
Okay. Never mind, sorry.
Okay, Mr. Arnold, did you second the vote?
Yes, I did.
Is there any further discussion among the board? If there is no discussion among the board, I will ask for a vote, please.
Mac Arnold,
Yes.
Heather Knight,
Yes.
Landon Overfield,
Yes.
Marcos Nicholas.
Marcos,
Yes.
you might be muted.
Yes.
Mr. Hopgood and Mr. Smithhart, thank you for your presentation. We have tabled this to the December meeting. Mr. and Mrs. Russell, thank you for your testimony. As you heard, this has been tabled to December, and it sounds like Mr. Smithhart is going to address some of the concerns that you have pointed out. I think this is a good ending to this today's presentation, and I look forward to when we pull it off the table next December.
Much appreciated. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're ready to leave.
Mr. Nix, I understand that you need to escort those in the courtroom out. So we will take a brief recess of about 10 minutes.
Teresa's gonna go ahead and do that, so I think we can go ahead and proceed with the next one.
Will we be
Okay.
allowed? Yes. Okay. Ray, I did elevate Olivia to a panelist, so she
She
should
should
be
be on that.
available to speak.
Okay.
Thank you. Ray.
Teresa, can you bring the next appeal to our attention, please?
It would be Ray.
Oh, okay. Teresa took the Mr. and Mrs. Russell. Okay. Mr. Nix, what is
Yes.
the next appeal, please?
Next appeal is 3411, is submitted by Olivia R. Terrain for the property located at 510 8th Street. Applicant is requesting a conditional use permit to place a Class A manufactured home pursuant to Article 2 definitions, Section 2.01, and Article 13, Section 13.03E, Appendix A, Zoning Code of Ordinances of the City of Henderson. The property is zoned R3. All adjoining property owners have been notified, and we have received no calls on this appeal. The zoning ordinances pertaining to Class A manufactured homes has recently been amended, and in the zoning locations where Class A manufactured homes were previously permitted, they did not provide for any opportunity to go through the variance process. They were required to meet the zoning district's strict setback requirements. With the zoning guidelines for Class A manufactured homes and their ability to help meet a goal of the city in providing for affordable housing opportunities while meeting current building code requirements, it was determined that Class A manufactured homes should have the same opportunity to request lot setback variances as do conventionally built homes. This was equally important in light of narrower and smaller lot sizes in the districts where they were allowed. Therefore, the ordinance was changed from a permitted use to a conditional use with the variance process added, making this the first conditional use appeal covered by the amended ordinance. If approved, the applicant will come back next month with the variance request that will also comply with this new amended ordinance. The applicant, in filling out their conditional use permit worksheet, states that the requested conditional use is justified because it is an essential use in that it meets a goal of the City of Henderson's vision plan by providing affordable housing as well as providing alternative housing solutions. Conditions that would eliminate or minimize adverse effects of the proposed use in the zoning district are: number one, the home will meet the zoning code requirements for Class A manufactured homes. Two, it will be an attractive addition to an otherwise empty lot by adding value and tax base to the neighborhood. Number three, public safety will be aided by having off-street parking. And four, the setback conditions will be complied with and are similar to other existing homes up and down 8th Street. The staff has reviewed and recommend approval for this request. It's shown all the pictures. Here's what the house will look like from the street, and that's the floor plan. That's all I have.
Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. Nix from the board?
I have one. Is the Class A certification, has that been filed with the paperwork, or do we have that?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Nix? Mr. Nix, you did not get any responses from any of the neighboring properties, right?
There were none.
Okay. Is the applicant available to speak, please?
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay. Would you please state your name and address?
Olivia Terrain, 304 South Green Street, apartment 4.
Ms. Terrain, is there anything, Ms. Terrain, do you promise to tell the truth?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything that you would like to add to the testimony?
I'd just like to say that this area that I'm actually putting the home on is actually, I'll be sharing a backyard with my parents as they're getting older. And 510 8th Street is, and when I say sharing the backyard, that's the way that it would turn out, the way that the property is set up. And I just believe that it would be a beautiful asset, bringing up the property value in the area as well.
Okay, thank you. Is there, I'm sorry, I don't have a pencil to write names down. Can you please tell me your name again?
That's okay. Olivia Terrain.
Terrain. Is there any questions for Ms. Terrain by the board? Are there any questions for Ms. Terrain by the board? Is there anybody to speak for or against Appeal 3411? Is there anybody here to speak for or against Appeal 3411? If there is nobody to speak for or against Appeal 3411, I will close the open forum and ask for a motion, please.
I'll make a motion. I move that we grant Appeal 3411 for a conditional use permit to place a Class A manufactured home for the property located at 510 8th Street with the following conditions. All drainage must be directed away from the neighbors. All outdoor lighting must be directed away from the neighbors. And all building codes for the city of Henderson should be followed. This conditional use permit is for the property. And that the evidence presented showed that the granting of this requested conditional use permit is justified because it is an essential use and that it will provide housing for a family. And that the evidence presented showed that the granting of the conditional use permit would promote the public health, safety, and welfare by improving the neighborhood and the surrounding area and provide suitable housing.
May I get a second, please?
Second.
May we get a vote?
Mac,
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
Landon,
Yes.
Marcos.
Yes.
Ms. Terrain,
Yes, sir.
Appeal 3411 has been granted in your favor. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you all for your time. Thank you.
May I get a motion to accept the meeting minutes of our October meeting?
So moved.
A
Second.
please. A vote?
Okay, let me get that. Landon, you made the motion. Heather, you seconded it.
Yes.
Okay. Mac,
Yes.
Heather,
Heather, if we
Heather,
lost you?
approve the minute.
Yes, sorry.
It's okay. Rob,
Yes.
Landon,
Yes.
Marcos.
Yes.
Is there any other business to come before this board this evening? If there is no other business to come before this board this evening, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So
Make a
moved.
motion to adjourn.
Thank you, everybody.
Heather, you sound so much better.
I'm on my phone.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So you're very clear tonight.
Where'd you eat tonight, Rob?
Actually, we were up at Irish Kevin's. I had some lunch up there. I had some fish, but not sure where we'll go tonight.
You like 7 fish?
What's that, Landon?
I'm
7
glad you
fish.
don't have to advertise that.
Yes. We have.
Have you been to 7 fish?
I'm not familiar with 7 Fish.
You need to try that at Cafe Soleil.
Oh, okay. In one of the hotels, yes.
No. It's not in a hotel. Cafe Soleil is in the middle of a residential area. And 7 Fish, I think, may be on Truman, if I remember correctly. It's a new building.
Oh, okay. I'll look for it.
All right.
I'll look for it.
Have fun.
Welcome.
Well, everyone, have a great evening.
You too.
Okay.
Go to Key West.
And I'm heading back out to Duval Street, so y'all have fun.
Well, thank you, Rob, for taking time to be with us.
Don't get too hot.
I enjoy it. This is fun.
See you, folks.
Y'all have a great evening.
Everybody have a good night.
All right, night.
Y'all ready for me to end?
It's a good thing.